Welcome back to the show. Today we're going to discuss two key concepts in Chinese millennial youth culture these days, nomadic youth and a concept known as sang or bereavement culture.
A lot has been written and stated about advantage of progress for the country, but continuing a theme that we touched on yesterday, there are downsides to all this advancement as well.
We'll look at these concepts and discuss them in their uniquely Chinese manifestations for the sake of this show, but as neither concept is totally unique to here, we'll also relate them to other cultures a little bit too.
One thing that we have to remind ourselves sometimes is that even when the subject matter is not uplifting, it is important to look at everything objectively. In this way, we hope to truly build some empathy for people who are struggling in different ways.
Right, and it provides the counterpoint to the dominant narrative in a way that will help others, i.e. not Chinese people, to humanize the people here who are too often viewed as a monoculture. And while it's also true that we have to summarize and compress a lot of information to fit into our format here, whenever possible, we do want to avoid overly simplistic reductionism for the sake of expediency. You feel me?
I haven't heard some of these words since Gaokao. Do people normally talk like that? Or just on standardized tests?
Well, that illustrates exactly why some people just give up on the whole academic and rat race game entirely. But more on that as we go. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is this concept of nomadic youth.
In Chinese, this is called 游牧青年. And before I get into the details, I want to point out right away that today's youth culture is kind of equal to individualism.
Right, just with Chinese characteristics. I like this comparison and think it holds up, but I'm getting ahead of the narrative here.
Yeah, credit for this term goes to a group called China Ethology. In Chinese, we say 青年志. They are a research team grounded in sociology and anthropology. They focus on researching Chinese youth groups and culture while providing commercial research and consulting to brands.
Their research, and that of many others, points out that the 80s generation of only children gave us the concept of the Little Emperor. Now, you might have heard of this in the West. This moment is said to represent the germination of the individual in modern China. Now, to keep this relatable to a wide audience, we'll simply call them millennials. But the research group did a study of the post-95 users specifically, meaning those people who came of age after 1995, and they found some interesting results as far as their career choices.
Right. This particular subset of the generation responded to a survey from QQ about their most anticipated careers. More than half of them responded with goals that revolved around technology and the internet. A new term was coined for them, 网红. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is an internet celebrity or KOL thing. In the 网红 life that young people yearn for, a mobile phone can connect them with the whole world. It makes them visible everywhere for better or worse.
So as with any giant change or disruption such as this, there are at least two sides of a coin to look at. On the more positive side, having a more unique sense of self and appreciation for one's individual talents has led many people to pursue greater freedoms in their choices. This has affected everything from their dependence on old-school work organizations and their lack of interest in playing a role in a more traditional hierarchy to their choices about how they live, socialize, and date. Most importantly, though, this has fundamentally affected their worldview, and the timing of this is very important because it coincides with, and in some ways has helped to accelerate or at least validate, the collapse of many traditional aspects of culture. And this starts to raise questions about the viability of some of those more traditional dreams in the first place. For those who can't win, many of them get despondent and ultimately quit.
We don't have time to do a show just about this topic today, but the research is very interesting. You can really learn a lot as you trace the individual evolutionary process here, from its origin in the post-80s to its widespread acceptance in the post-mid-90s, and to its established status today. The opportunities are increasing, but along with them are the risks. The bottom line is that things are changing, and the future is approaching rapidly. So those can learn to deal with it the best will thrive. All these new technologies create new cultures, new lifestyles, and really new species. It's a lot to deal with.
It sure is. So to get back to the term we mentioned up top here, it's said that young people or newer business models need to adapt to nomadic rules to survive. They need to not stay siloed in one specialty or walled off behind the safety of their spot on a corporate flowchart that's carved in stone from 20 years ago. The people who win tomorrow have to embrace a more comprehensive and proactive view of things. They need to develop a more forward-looking perspective of the direction of the world and their careers, expect a more agile implementation of their actions, and strive for more open collaboration and symbiosis wherever they work and whatever they do.
Wow. And with all these new societal changes, business have been hit with unprecedented impact. The acceleration of information flow and adoption of new standards and styles has led to some comprehensive and sometimes subversive changes. So for brands, it means the goal of winning young people as customers and making them loyal is harder and harder.
Right. So the key to maintaining a young and dynamic brand is the continuous awareness of and response to the values of young people. Of course, this is not a new concept by any means, but we're pointing out the obvious here to help illustrate just how difficult that is to do when the target, meaning your customers and their tastes, are changing faster than you can keep track of. And this leads us to the flip side of all this progress. Those people who can't or don't want to compete in this new version of that rat race.
And those people are the ones we talk about when we discuss song. Let's try a little roleplay to illustrate. You have your script?
Right here. Hey, Ying-Ying, how was your weekend? Did you do anything exciting?
Nothing. Just the song the whole weekend. I just did 葛优躺.
Wow.
That basically means I did nothing lying around there.
And scene. Wow, that's impressive.
Acting is fun sometimes, but luckily, I'm not really experiencing song myself.
Yeah, I think you kind of have the opposite of that, whatever that is, but it's a good thing. So let's define song a little better now.
Song culture refers to some young people after 90s generally in real life. If they lose their goals and hopes and fall into the pits of decadence and despair, they are unable to get themselves back on track. They can sort of lose their minds, drifting aimlessly without emotion or consciousness. Apparently, it can be difficult to break through the desperation they feel in the face of how hard the new reality can be. Their development prospects are too confused, and the road ahead seems impossible, so it's easier for them to check out, as you might say.
Anyone who's ever been through a serious depression can relate to this for sure. But even if you haven't, you're lucky. Most of us have at least dealt with one major traumatic difficulty in our lives, something that leads to a feeling of helplessness. And for most of us, thankfully, it's temporary, and it passes in due time with the right support. But for some youth, they've accepted this diminished capacity as their reality, and it's really tough to rise above it, as Ying just said.
Part of the reason for this is the undeniable social fact that, along with the rapid development of the domestic economy, the gap between rich and poor has never been greater here. It has been reported that top 10% of people here holds more than 70% of the country's wealth, and that's likely a very conservative estimate.
And this is where we get into the self-fulfilling prophecy part of this, namely that the potential upside for someone without resources to begin with is extremely narrow. So even if you work insanely hard and excel in every way, it's still very difficult to beat the odds and jump out of the economic class into which you were born.
And realizing this is what led to the idea of mourning become an accepted way to relieve young people's feeling of helplessness. They say things online to each other like, I admit that I'm a waste. How can you tell me about my life? 我已经承认我是个废物了，你还怎么对我的生活指手画脚?
Wow, there's more. That sounds depressing.
It sounds very song, I tell you.
It does. It's very sad. Yeah, there's a feeling that instead of torturing yourself to achieve great success, you should learn to be happy with the tiny little successes that are right at your fingertips in your daily life. Things like enjoying a show or a game you like, or a bag of chips in your lap that you eat on the couch in a stupor. It's a lot like the movie Trainspotting, only without all the needles, 80s pop culture references, and great narrative structure with a cool payoff at the end. This version is more like the world's longest one-act play, one that lasts a lifetime. Do you know the French term ennui?
Nope. What does it mean?
Basically this, only with more poetry behind it. It has more of a literary, existential philosophy vibe to it, though.
Interesting. But in a way, although we've been talking a lot about song as a fairly practical response to limited options, there is another, even more philosophical reason for it, too. It's called 失落的自我, or lost self.
Yes, it's helpful to recognize that song is not just a problem faced by Chinese youth today. The philosopher Charles Taylor said in his 2001 book, The Roots of the Self, that the most typical moral dilemma of modern people is the loss of meaning, or that life is meaningless. If you lack a sense of direction, you can have no certainty. So disengagement in this sense derives from a spiritual crisis, not just a practical, I bum my gal-cal, where will I go to college one.
Wow. What's really missing is a sense of purpose that previous generations had. Young people are constantly struggling with these identity questions, no matter which country you're from, wondering who they are and why they're here and what's the point of things they're doing. But those are difficult questions to answer now, much harder than before when China was still trying to kickstart its development.
In the past, young people here had visible evidence that their lives were connected to the greater purpose of helping to build their country, to advance it in various ways, to teach the future generation, etc. Without getting too controversial here, every country has its own versions of patriotism. But in this modern day and age, where everybody also has access to at least some version of the internet, younger people are finding more options available to consider than their parents could have ever dreamed of, and that can be tricky to deal with.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm working in a field and having conversations like this one right here that wouldn't have been possible for lots of reasons other than the technology involved just 20 years ago.
Well, I'm still trying to figure it all out myself, and I'm 20 years older than you, so I hear you. When I stop to consider someone here, though, who grew up without a lot of advantages in their life, and they're then told from birth that they have to climb a seemingly impossible ladder to get ahead, or else they'll be doomed to a life of misery, it's pretty hard to find a good answer, honestly. That kind of challenge motivates some people, people like you, but everyone isn't built for those altitudes.
Hopefully, part of the solution will come by an evolution of society. In a framework of multiple values and relative peace, people have more freedom to choose. For example, you can choose altruism, or hoarding money, or power for its own sake versus peace. In the framework in which we currently live here, the value of money and power is much higher than other things.
Right. So even if someone individually wants to play a different game, the institutional structure does not support it as readily as it does the money and power game. I think only time will solve this on a broad scale, but this lack of a strong, clear, and meaningful reason for existence itself is the deeper reason for Song today. Yingying, do you have any tips to help the kids and to let us end this on a somewhat more optimistic note? And also to help people who want to work with this subset of the generation and, sell them shiny things, which might help a little bit too, ironically, at least in the short term. Please say yes.
I will try. You know me.
I do, and that's why we're counting on you here.
Okay, one idea is to nurture the ability to laugh at yourself. It already exists a little in some culture anyway, as I was saying, but increasing that might help people improve their outlook.
Nice. Okay, that's a good start. And what about increasing understanding to reach this demographic in cold, cruel marketing speak?
For brands who want to understand Chinese youth culture, you can watch 2 or 3 episodes of whatever the hot TV dramas and variety shows are, no matter how much you actually like them, actually.
I like the singing and music shows, but the others, not so much.
It's a good thing you're not the target demo then.
Indeed. Please continue.
Getting a sense of what the current cultural phenomena are is the fastest way to understand the culture and preference of young people. And if you can afford to hire consultants, you could get a lot out talking with people who are working within the entertainment industry in particular.
Hashtag not a plug, but yeah.
And as for the culture of song specifically, remember that it's just another reflection of social problems. Young people here are used to making gentle protest to the society and world they live in, so it's a very local style response. But all of us should be empathetic and try to help solve the greater issues which will help them and everyone else.
That's a great way to end it. Thanks, Yingying. Before we go, I want to mention a really cool article that Yingying sent me. It's a fantastic explanation and goes into some depth about song culture in ways that we couldn't get to here today. We've linked it on the resources page of our website, howchinaworkspodcast.com, and we hope you'll check it out.
Also, I want to share a quote from writer Roman Roland. He said, "There's only one kind of true heroism. It's to still love life after recognizing the truth of it."
The best we can all do is to seek out our own true North Star and then follow it where it leads us. Mine led me to China. How about you? Thanks for listening to us get all philosophical today. We'll have some more lighthearted episodes coming soon, so don't you worry. For now, I'm Brendan Davis.
And I'm Yingying Li. See you tomorrow on How China Works.